Great. Thank you, JB and Catherine. Just give me half a second here.
While Chris is pulling this up, again, what we're trying to do here is provide an update to Conceptual Plan. Chris is showing us the newest ideas he has for the bridges and island area based on the feedback that we've received so far. We're moving now into territory here where we're looking to close up the conceptual plan. In other words, the different kinds of elements that he'll be discussing today. It'll be really important to get any further feedback that you have about whether you think this is compatible with the design or not, for whatever whatever reason. So that'll be an important outcome to this meeting today. We also I'm going to record this, or I am recording this, and I'll put this up on the website if people want to take another look, or if people weren't able to attend this meeting, want to take a look at it. And we're going to be giving people a certain amount of time. I need to look at my notes after Chris does his presentation to get back to us with any comments that they have on this presentation. So take it away, Chris.
Thank you, JB. And I believe that date is January 8th that you outlined.
Thank you.
To get feedback to you. All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here with you all again. Also, thanks to the two planning partners, Wyndham Regional Commission and Southwest Regional Planning Commission. Been great working with them so far, and I look forward to continuing throughout the winter and spring. So we're here to go over the revised conceptual plan for the island and existing bridges. It's titled The Living River, Balancing Recreation and Conservation Along the Hinsdale Island Greenway. So here we're looking at the conceptual design, and this is defined most prominently by the sort of multimodal pedestrian spine running through the island and along the existing bridges, called the Hinsdale Island Greenway. This proposed pedestrian connection, bicycle connection, serves to connect downtown Brattleboro and the Brattleboro Amtrak station immediately to the development on the New Hampshire side, Runnings and Norms, as well as the Wantostakit-Monadnock Trail and Wantostakit Mountain. In addition, it keeps an open mind to future new connections beyond the scope of this project, such as river access, connecting this proposal to the West River Trail network to the north in Vermont, and also an extender on the New Hampshire side between the end of this project and the current end of the Fort Hill Rail Trail, which would in effect create a pedestrian and bicycle connection across the river from the entirety of the West River Trails all the way through the Fort Hill Rail Trail and Hinsdale. We're going to be starting out to the west on Bridge Street near the terminus at the southern end of downtown Brattleboro, and working across to the east as we explore the updated and revised spaces in this plan. Here we see a picture taken from last summer of the existing conditions along Bridge Street, a very narrow sidewalk, and the existing lane alignment on Bridge Street. When the Anna Hunt Marsh and Charles Dana are closed to traffic, the reduced traffic volumes will make it manageable to reduce the width of this road by one lane. We can just have a single lane in each direction and allow for expansion of this sidewalk. This is shown in a rendering here of the proposed conditions with a expanded and enhanced pedestrian way, buffered from the traffic by a bioswale planter to infiltrate stormwater and increase pedestrian and biker safety. In the distance, you can see the Whetstone Brewery on the shoreline and the Anna Hunt Marsh Bridge. A quick note is that in all renderings, the Anna Hunt Marsh and Charles Dana bridges are being shown in a new color to illustrate the potential and also the significance of color as a design choice. I don't have a ton of marker colors that really pop, and so red is the one I went with. So I'm not specifically advocating for red. I believe the color choice is something the communities and committee should decide, but I do think it's an important decision that needs to be considered. As you move down along the Greenway, you approach the Anna Hunt Marsh Bridge. Currently, it's a paved streetway, and upon renovation and design implementation, we're proposing a mixed-use, multimodal transportation route. So space is split between movement and gathering. The majority is given to movement back and forth across the bridge, but then using sort of temporary, or not temporary, but maybe movable is a better word, installations such as standing tables shown here on the whetstone brewery end of the bridge, planter boxes to create separation and define space to allow for a range of activities to take place. In this proposal, the travel width along the bridge is 12 feet wide. After talking with the chief of fire from one of the towns, we determined that about 10 feet would be adequate for the existing trucks in town. So this should maintain more than adequate emergency vehicle access across the bridges and to the island. For the approach, the design approach to both bridges, the Anna Hunt Marsh and the Charles Dana, I believe that it would benefit from being a flexible approach defined by modular components. I think this is important because it allows for the evolution of the design to better suit community needs and possibly changing needs, whether that's over years or over seasons. And so here are just two initial sort of back of napkin working sketches on what some of those modular and movable planters may look like. But this also extends to any sort of tables or seating furniture. Now, again, this allows for the design to respond to use and feedback, and also gives you the flexibility to consider the use of these bridges for other sorts of events, whether it's community art takeover or some sort of market. I've also heard suggestions through our various public forums of wedding venue or wedding photography and whatnot. A little further along the Anna Hunt Marsh Bridge, in an area that's tentatively sketched out as a community art gallery, showing existing conditions and then the potential for what a community art exhibition may look like. In this rendering, we're looking at what's called a chalk walk, where chalk artists take over a section of street, paint murals. Lots of times you see very talented 3D chalk artists come and create optical illusions that make it seem like something is coming out of the road, or there's a hole going into the road, as seen here. And then at the terminus of the Anna Hunt Marsh Bridge, we come onto the western edge of the island. This is where we're proposing a fairly wide gateway promenade, outlined in pink on this plan. And this is the location and the existing conditions. And the proposal is going to utilize both the existing roadway at this point and a section of this grass shoulder and turning into temporary parking, I believe a gravel surface. This is a section rather than a perspective, so a cut through the roadway at that point, showing the width around 50 feet. So again, that's the width of the existing roadway and that grassed shoulder, and its potential uses. Bumping out the width of the promenade at this initial entry point allows for more flexible uses. It allows you to keep transportation avenues open while also bringing on to the island other programming to support events, whether it's cultural events at the amphitheater or community events arranged more along the spine of the Greenway itself. So here you see some food brought to the island. Off of this promenade to the northern edge is the proposed play hill. And so this is a rendering of that proposed play hill. It's a low impact, very naturalistic proposition here. No slides, no sort of typical playground equipment, simply using a series of rock blocks placed into the hillside to create a sort of artificial rock scramble for both children and nothing would stop adults too from enjoying this, moving between the roadway ridgeline and the base of the ridgeline in this existing forest. And this is oriented to the west, looking at the Brattleboro skyline in the background there. So just a little bit further towards the end of that wider promenade gateway is the proposed amphitheater. So this siding changed a little bit. It moved a little further inland from the last time I presented, and that's to decrease the environmental impact of this amphitheater development. There was quite a strong view expressed for sort of a least intensive development without much hardscaping, such as retaining walls, seating walls, and whatnot. So that requires a space with a bit more run and a bit less steeper grade, and so that led to this move. The existing conditions here are what would be a fairly open understory if it weren't for the current sort of dominant invasive species, primarily Asiatic bittersweet, but also multiflora rose and Japanese barberry, that are currently occupying the understory and much of the overstory as well. The proposed conditions here show it's about a 60 to 70 foot deep space, and then you have a small level performance space at the base with a medium grade 10%, 8 to 10% down, and relatively low impact rings of seating. There is a flat level area offset of the Greenway at the top for ADA access, as well as we'll see a ramp curving down in the adjacent woodlands to provide ADA access at the base. Additionally, the vegetation management should allow for views to open up to the water from this space, which will help increase its multi-seasonal appeal. Moving a bit further towards the sort of hanging off of the center of the island, but towards this southwestern facing edge, is the proposed public water access. We're calling the Hinsdale Island Beach and Cove. This can be accessed by the two ramps towards the center of the island leading down, or through the ramp adjacent to the amphitheater leading down. And we're going to zoom in on this in just a second. So the space really doesn't get pulled too far into the island, and again, that's to reduce disturbance to the existing overstory floodplain trees. And it utilizes a small stretch of shoreline, which would be cleared where the beach is, and a slight change to the shoreline structure as well. A slight, very shallow, like 1 or 2 feet down, depression would be created to create this protected cove, which will act as sort of a waiting area for younger kids, just a foot or two deep. A series of placed boulders protect the entrance to the cove, and a small section for slightly deeper wading and swimming. And then off of that, further out into the river, proposing a handful of dock pilings, which would provide opportunities for boats to tie up and owners to wade in. The short stretch of unprotected beach closer to the top allows opportunities for motorized boats that of the appropriate craft to nose up into the shallows, or nose up and anchor into the shallows. As well, the entirety of this is open to paddle boards and kayakers pulling their craft up, and they would be able to slip through these boulders and access the entirety of the beach. We're going to look at this gateway space first, inland of the cove. Then we're going to look at a transect from the gateway to the dock pilings, and finally we're going to look at a rendering of the beach. This is a section through that gateway showing sort of the proportions of the space. There's a nice entryway that runs straight from where these two ramps down through the now managed and enhanced native understory. Enter and go to the cove, and then off to the side there's spaces to introduce a few seating elements. Here on the left, where again is that same gateway and seating space, you see the short section of beach with the wading inlet and the first round of protective boulders. You see the deeper wading and protected swimming area with a second round of boulders. And then you see some additional section leading out to where those pilings are for boat tie-ups. And this sort of from that protective ring of boulders is a rendering looking at that stretch of beach along the shoreline. Again, showing those opportunities for different types of use, for different types of craft to pull up, and the introduction of these seating ledges to delineate the walking path from the beach so that craft aren't pulled up too far and block movement through the space. Moving to the northernmost tip of the island, we're looking at the proposed Island Park viewing deck. And this is meant to provide a sort of pristine platform for scenic viewing, wildlife viewing, and also people viewing as motorized craft and paddlers move up and down the river. As we continue along the Greenway to the eastern portion of the island, the portion of the island that outside of the roadside is dominated by marsh, which has been set aside and conserved in this conceptual plan. We have 3 more wildlife viewing platforms. 2 of them in the middle and towards the end of the island face the marsh for wildlife viewing and then also scenic viewing downriver. And 1 in between those 2 faces to the north, allowing for upriver viewing, also great views of the Wonostoquet Mountain and that small island just about 100 yards or so off the main Hinsdale Island. At the easternmost end, just off of where the Charles Dana touches down, is one of the older bridge footings that's currently been observed as being a good spot for fishing due to less vegetation along the edge to tangle your line in. So this is being proposed to continue to be set aside as a fishing pier, but improving access to it, providing a bit of seating and trimming a bush or 2 that currently would tangle up lines. As mentioned previously, the Charles Dana Bridge is going to have a lot of similarity in design aesthetic, modular components, and types of spaces as to the Anna Hunt Marsh, except it's going to prioritize a bit more heavily areas for scenic viewing and sort of more contemplative spaces as we sort of move along this gradient between denser populated to less denser populated. This is one photo from the existing Charles Dana Bridge looking downriver. You can see Norm's Marina there on the left and the older historic railroad bridge downstream. And here is a rendering showing an opportunity for, again, a sort of contemplative taking in of this beautiful landscape. All the way on the New Hampshire side, in between the Charles Dana and Mountain Road, is a parcel that is going to be developed in part by DOT to retain and treat stormwater coming off the roadsides. And there's also a proposal here to provide it as a point of water access on the New Hampshire side. So we're going to zoom in here and take a look at that. So here we have our Mountain Road just downhill of the Runnings building. And what's being proposed is a water access that provides for a kayak launch point on the New Hampshire side and also access to a second fishing pier. Now, this is going to require a slight change in the most up-to-date plans I've seen for the stormwater basin. In order to get room to have any on-street parking on Mountain Road, the stormwater basin is going to have to be moved about 10 to 13 feet west away from the road base, which may be achievable. We'd have to talk with DOT and sort of get into the details. I believe this is an effort worth considering quite strongly, because although the Runnings owner has graciously said that she would allow people who wanted to access the water here to park in her development, that's still quite a hike, whether it's around the back or down the front on the new proposed ramp that New Hampshire DOT will be building to get down to this section of Mountain Road and access the water. Being able to, at the very least, drop off and ideally have a parking space or 2 will greatly, I believe, improve the usability of this water access point, and also make it a premier water access point for ADA access. We have the room here to run out an ADA grade ramp, ADA graded path all the way down to the water and the fishing pier. So being able to park adjacent to it and cut down the amount of the ADA path you need to converse makes it much more friendly to movement challenged portions of the population. I want to take a moment to talk about the conceptual path systems. They're being conceptualized as 3 levels of accessibility, and the majority are being conceptualized as ADA accessible. In a large part, this is simply the status quo. The entire spine of this is running along an existing roadway, which is ADA accessible, both in surfacing material and grade, and that's going to be maintained. Additionally, some of the new paths to sort of the critical community-based gathering places off of this main spine are also being proposed as being designed in such a way and with such materials as to be ADA accessible. That includes this loop connecting to both the front of the amphitheater and this big water access gathering space, as well as to the viewing platforms and the fishing pier. In addition, ADA graded paths will make it easier for people to get down to the northern portion of the island. And so this is going to be composed of a range of materials. A lot of the existing is asphalt. Where possible, asphalt and concrete would be the economical choice for new paths. And then where environmental concerns bar the use of asphalt and concrete, then we think about more creative solutions, whether that's floated boardwalk on helical piers, whether that's more of a low-tech deployable boardwalk, similar to what's used often on Cape Cod dunes, where you have boards attached by fiber that can be rolled up and unrolled and deployed along pathways in a more of a seasonal manner. Level 2 access consists of this loop around the western edge of the island, under the bridge, and around this promenade. And so this would be more of a packed gravel path. So not ADA accessible, but still graded very accessibly, still a very accessible material, just not to the degree of what's necessary, say, for wheelchair access. Then finally, level 3 would be the widest ranging loop out to the northern tip of the island. This will be the lowest impact and the most sensitive path that's put in, proposed simply as a packed earth footpath. And so, this will also, you'll see varying accessibility with the seasons, right? In the wet season, probably none but the most avid birder will want to get their feet muddy and make it out to that viewing platform. But then in dry weather in the summer months, quite accessible to a majority of the population. The final point I'd like to discuss with you all is erosion control and shoreline stabilization. I think you have an opportunity here in a few critical points to test out a few strategies to improve shoreline stabilization and sediment retention. These areas are outlined in pink here on the northeastern face, and then also the upstreammost portion before the beach and cove. One such strategy is log spurs. If this little diagram, the 2 straight lines, are your river channel, a log spur is basically a log anchored to your shoreline that comes out at an angle and serves to sort of deflect the high velocity flow from the shoreline and creates in the shaded area downstream of it a lower flow shadow, so to speak, where you get increased sediment deposition rates. This is an example of, on a smaller stream channel, of what this type of thing looks like here. Instead of a single log and root wad, they used wattles, which is bunches of medium-sized logs sort of staked together into a mass. And again, showing the area of lower flow rate and therefore increased sediment deposition and shoreline protection. When partnered with the planting of willows and alders on the shoreline adjacent to where these structures connect, you sort of get a synergistic effect. These types of plants are great for wildlife value, and they're vegetative colonizers, so they will spread and sprout via roots, and they're very adept at spreading into new uncolonized shoreline sediments. And so as those sediments accrue downstream of these structures, they are colonized pretty quickly by the willows and alders, which help to hold them in place during flood conditions. And then the other type of strategy for a channel that's been identified when studying the topography, the channel is along this purple line. It's not permanently filled with water. It's a flood channel, so during flood conditions it would fill up. And it's a foot or two deeper than the rest of this northern part of the island. And so what that means is you have deeper and more water force impacting the base of the existing roadway. And so proposing a strategy of leaky dams, which again uses primarily wood-based woody debris, either in bundles or larger logs, placed perpendicular to the channel. And what it does is, again, traps sediment, slows down the flow rate, and also expands the floodplain to adjacent lands so that more sediment settles out and over time raises the height of that land. And so these ideas would be something where when you get further down the line, and whether it's this committee or in another one, and begins to think about phasing of whatever the final design is, this would be something where I'd encourage it to be included as a at a test scale in phase 1, just to make sure that it works in this exact context. And if it does, then you can, with more confidence, go ahead with any sort of necessary investment to deploy it on a larger scale or in other areas. So I know that was a lot. Thank you all for your time. I'm really happy to be working on this project with you, and I look forward to talking with you about it, answering questions as I can, anything else that comes up.
Thank you very much, Chris. Does anybody have any questions for Chris today?
I have one. Is there any area that you have in mind for restrooms? And
yes.
how is that being addressed? I just see this here.
Yes, thank you, Shannon. I sort of realized that, but it was too late this morning that I didn't have an illustration in. But yes, so adjacent to, well, pretty much adjacent to the amphitheater at the level of the main Greenway is where I'm proposing a small restroom facility, and that's the only roofed structure that's being proposed for this. I believe and am proposing that it should be a 2-level composting toilet system that will not require extending main typical sewage lines across the Anhunt Marsh Bridge from Brattleboro to it. It would be I forget the name of the model I was researching, but basically it's incorporated into this hillside splitting between the main path and this ramp down to the northern end on the back. And what that allows for is access at a lower level where the composting capsule is contained. And then at the upper level, at the path elevation, the main path elevation is where you enter and have the toilets and restroom facility. And by separating it like that, you get the capacity necessary for more than occasional use, which is sort of the limiting factor of models that contain the composting unit as a part of the toilet itself. And then this particular model uses a fan usually powered by a solar array to create a negative airflow from the toilet hole down through the compost container so that fumes don't fill up the restroom room itself, and they're then vented out of the top instead. So it'll smell like a normal clean bathroom on the inside, ideally. Thank you for bringing that up, Shannon. It actually smells
better than a normal bathroom because it vents the way it vents.
Thank you, Christopher.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Apparently, you are aware that on the downstream side, some years ago, we're talking many now, there was an attempt to put in a boat launch. It's paved, but the sediment kept blocking it up, and that became a an issue, a problem. But the last thing you addressed with the log, can't remember what you called them now, but those are designed to stop that from happening. Is that what I'm understanding? It sounds interesting.
So the point of those is actually to trap more sediment where you want more sediment trapped. And so along portions of shoreline that would be vulnerable to being undercut in flood conditions, that's where you'd want to employ that strategy to sort of build up the landmass along that shoreline and help reduce the force of flows impacting the edge of the land.
Okay, I was referring to the beach and cove area that show on your paperwork here. That's to the left of that, right above your hand now, right up in that area. You had something that was going to mitigate the sediment from forming there. It was going to be out further or away from the beach, so the beach wouldn't become a sediment collector like the current boat launch does.
So this structure right here is what you're referring to, I believe.
I think so.
As I understand it, it would trap a little bit of sediment in the front. It would also trap a little bit behind, but the main reason I'm putting that in is because you have a more vulnerable section of shoreline here since it's cleared of vegetation, and this will slow down the flow velocity downstream of it, and thus reduce the potential for erosion under flood conditions of this beach area.
So that would not address the sediment that currently accumulates there?
No, you would still get sediment accumulation over time to a degree. The point that would probably require maintenance on some time scale would be this small inlet that's being created along the edge. As you get sediment accumulation, the entire edge might move out, but it'll only do that, to such a degree before it then reverts back into an erosive state, as the channel narrows. But this little inlet, I would expect requires maintenance on sort of a longer time scale. And I'm not a hydrologist, so I couldn't tell you if that's 5 years or 20. I suspect it's in between those two. I don't know if that answers your question completely, Ed, but hopefully it was somewhat relevant.
It's relevant, but I just based on what I've seen happen there without any changes at all, just Mother Nature being as she is, that boat launch has been sedimented up, had a lot of sediment gathering there. And I'm wondering if we'll have the same problem in the beach area. And it's been over a number of years. So again, you answered the question and say you're not sure how long it would take for that to become a problem, but it definitely was a problem for the boat launch that's existing there.
If I can sort of add some information to this, so Great River Hydro, who owns the hydroelectric dam above and below, put in their new application on December 7th, which is going to be a pretty radical change in operations. So Smokey, what we've been seeing occur there over the past decade or more may be very different than what may be occurring under the new license. And, right now the water runs through the system where they generate mostly in the evening, and then you have a larger flush of water coming through that's let down the river. Under the new operations scenario, they're going to be, it's going to run more like a run of river more often. So more water will be just flowing through the system and changing kind of along the natural hydrograph, right? So if it's the wet season, it'll be a higher current, and then, lesser depending on like rain cycles and things like that. That was not very articulate, but at any rate, the whole dynamic of how sediment moves through the river may be very different in the next 5 or 10 years. So, and the other sort of piece of information is as we, if we were to move forward with this exact design or something even close, the next step would be an environmental engineering. And so where you would have a hydrologist really looking at the dynamics of what's happening and the energy flows of the water. And so that we could kind of work out those details and answer those questions at a later point in time.
Thank you, Kevin.
Kathy, can I ask a follow-up question related to that? Which is, can we leverage any of the relicensing effort to study that issue? Or is it something that would be expected us to find our own sources of funding to study that issue?
Yes, we can and should leverage as much as possible to study that issue. And so that operational change, I think, is going to be a big win for the river, and it's great. It's a great, great move on the part of Great River Hydro. But what is not included in the license, and which we will be arguing to include, is monitoring of the changes over time, and also much more investment in recreation than what they currently proposed in their application. So. Yeah, I could definitely see a role for Great River Hydro, being a partner in that, and we'll be advocating for that. And I would suggest that, this is sort of getting off topic, but all of the other organizations and towns involved in this discussion should probably plan to comment in the coming year on this application.
Thank you, Kathy. I think we're all set with questions.
Catherine, this is Steve.
Oh, we've got a couple hands up, Catherine.
Oh, okay. Hold on. I had to switch to my phone. My internet went out at my house, so that was fun.
I can help you out if you'd like. Steve DiOrio and Chris Chapman both have their hands up.
Oh, okay. So we'll start with Steve.
Just a quick comment and question. Chris, really appreciate the renderings that you've done, and we want to try to make them available to more Hinsdale residents via our newsletter, area news, and such. So I think you did a great job with those. Quick question on the pilings and that log system for the sediment. Are those, for lack of something scientific, are those ice proof when we have in the spring when there's an ice out or the ice crashes down the Connecticut River? Would those be stable?
So I can again answer your question in part, but with a lot of caveats since I'm also not the expert in the field. But they have been used in other case studies I looked at in climates that do have ice flows. But every stream system is unique, and so you'd have to have whatever bioengineering firm designs the final structure to be used in this exact spot to account for the sometimes massive ice flows that you can have on the Connecticut River. So they would have to be pinned in place, or they would have to have quite a robust anchoring system to account for that, Steve.
Okay, thank you.
And I will send this entire presentation to JB, so you'll have access to all the images and you can get what you need from him.
Great, appreciate it.
Thank you. So we'll hear from Chris Chapman.
Hi, thank you very much. First, I want to just tell you how absolutely wonderfully impressed I am by how Mr. Ramaj and his team have envisioned the uses of the island and the areas, to the east in New Hampshire. I think that's just fabulous with, boating access, fishing pier, stormwater treatment, play area, ADA accessibility, erosion control. I strongly suspect we're going to have a lot of enthusiasm for the use of the island and the bridges, because it's a strange quirk of history that there's so little actual access to the river now. And I just see pent up demand for it and nothing but good to come of it. I also am assuming, and perhaps Chris could comment on this, that active use would discourage things like graffiti and vandalism. That I think that'll be important. You know, whatever you put there would have a coating on it to make it easy to clean. Because you know, graffiti and vandalism beget more of same, in my experience. Here's a suggestion to get rid of the poison ivy along the roadway on the island. Right now, you know, in the summertime, the conditions for that poison ivy seem to be ideal. It's lush, big leaves, thick foliage, nice waxy substance. I mean, this is healthy poison ivy. Is it so that if you just lower the acidity in the, you know, with things like marble chips or lime, that'll help? I've heard that is so. In the last of the most recent previous public hearing, Mr. Mack mentioned something like, how is this going to be paid for in the terms of maintenance? I would suggest that that there's a deep well of opportunity there. Right now, we have voluntary groups like Rotary clubs that go out once a year and participate in the Connecticut River Conservancy's annual cleanup. And they pulled out tires and junk and all kinds of stuff several years in a row. And that's just a sign, a symbol of the civic mindedness of the people who live around those islands, the island and the bridges. You know, the West River Park, beautiful little park or big park, just north of the new I-91 bridge over Route 30 in Vermont, was paid for entirely out of donated money. No tax money was put into that. It's municipally maintained now, but built on contributions. Also, the West River Rail Trail has a lot of volunteer activity, as do older organizations a little more distant, like Appalachian Trail, the Appalachian Mountain Club, and Long Trail volunteers. They turn out to maintain things. The Withington Rink is an example of many. It is just emblematic of a lot of local philanthropy. I would think that local organizations, perhaps the Downtown Business Alliance in Brattleboro or the Chamber of Commerce, could be agents of organizing volunteers to help with the maintenance in order to reduce the cost, perhaps to zero. I don't know if that's envisioning too much. And I want to respond to the person who was talking about minimizing the use of the islands in order to maximize the wildlife inhabitation, the wildlife habitat. I would think that there would be a benefit from the use of the island with low impact type improvements, that there would be an opportunity for and perhaps a manifestation of more respect for wild areas. Right now, that area is basically abandoned, and it's up to the goodwill of locals to keep it from getting worse. And I would think that there would be, with awareness comes more respect for the outdoors and the natural resources. And in addition to that comment, I'd like to address the issue of the bridge colors. I do think that the bridge colors should not affect habitat, because I don't see how that would affect nesting or migration or just inhabitation of various kinds of wildlife like waterfowl and songbirds and the use by hawks and owls, higher on the food chain, so I, as somebody who grew up in Vermont, I really understand that concern very well. I'd like to suggest that with regard to the human use, that there be historical plaques, because both of those bridges are named for people who did a lot for the area. Anna Hunt Marsh, if I'm not mistaken, owned what is now Wantasticate Mountain and gave it to the Brattleboro Retreat, which in turn gave it to the state of New Hampshire for use as a public amenity. This is I would think that there is so much value to that bridge and the name on it that historical plaques would be part of the picture. I know the Brattleboro Historical Society is very active. They run a column in Saturday's Brattleboro Reformer, and they have a very active website, and their writers are just excellent. And I would think that they'd be that you could bring them into something like that very easily with their enthusiasm. And I'd like to reiterate a point that I made last week. It's really a set of points I made last week about the importance of the bridges as symbols of the cooperation and intermingled life of Brattleboro and Hinsdale, and also the historical value of the bridge and the local iconographic importance of both bridges, and setting color to them, enhanced coloration to the bridges, because those areas are going to be such widely used public amenities in a number of uses. And I would think that on the Brattleboro side, that would certainly be so. There's just so much opportunity being opened up by the closure of Bridge Street to through traffic, and the proximity to the new Amtrak station and the museum and the restaurant and so on and so forth. I do want to just reiterate how important I feel it is to do something that's more spectacular with the bridge coloring in such an economic way as simply substituting a brighter color for a drabber color. And anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to put in my 2 cents on this, and I really look forward to seeing the results here, because once again, my compliments to the planning commissions and their use of the UMass planners, planning graduate students, for what they've done. It's astonishing. It's just astonishing to see how comprehensively this has been viewed. I'm just so happy to be to witness something like that, where this once in a lifetime opportunity is being taken up to its full utility. I just can't thank you enough. So thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you, Chris. Actually, I had a question for you, Christopher, about at the last meeting, I believe it was, Robert Ryan expressed the importance of lighting. And I know that this was touched on a little bit earlier by Don Lyford about the use of solar lighting as is proposed for the new bridge. And I'm just wondering if you have given lighting a little bit more thought as to, and you're starting to think of some recommendations for the island and bridges as with respect to lighting itself. And I know that's been, I'll also add that I know that Chris Chapman brought this up, I think, about graffiti, and we've received we've received a few, I should say, comments in the survey about crime, people wanting to feel safe out on the island. I'm assuming particularly during night. And so And I know that one of our, both of our police departments on either side of the river have expressed the need for lighting as well, I think. So can you speak to that a little bit for us?
Yeah, thanks, JB. That's a great question. So I'll tell you my thoughts to this moment, but then I'll also just mention that since a conceptual lighting plan is a discrete deliverable, I'll be getting to you all and presenting in the spring. I am saving the bulk of my specific recommendations and research for that, which is why I haven't addressed it to date. But as far as some general thoughts go, it's extremely important that the main pathway is lit to some degree during the night. So that's the main spine along what's currently the roadway. I am in general against bringing permanent nighttime lighting into any of the other areas off of the pathway, just due to the effect that has on various wildlife species. I think though that we can find a good balance along that main pathway of creating a safely illuminated corridor while also reducing light trespass into the important wildlife habitats in the northern and southern sections of the island. I think I'm not super familiar with the exact model Dawn was talking about. I'll have to look it up. But in general, we should be thinking about lighting heights that are much closer to the ground than what you typically see along roadways, because we don't have cars here anymore on a normal basis, and pedestrian lighting is a whole different game if you don't also need to light the way for vehicles. And then the other thing I'll say is I think there's also, especially on the bridges, and perhaps depending on sort of more detailed space specific proposals or sort of temperate, what may be temporary community art installations that could occur along such a pathway, you have the potential to find a balanced sort of highlight lighting program to highlight whether it's architecture on the bridges, art installation piece or whatnot, that again finds the right balance between beauty and safety, but also limiting that light trespass so that we minimize impact on the surrounding natural systems. It's pretty general, but that's what I've got right now, JB.
No, that's a good answer.
I don't see any other hands raised.
I would just note, on the lights,
Okay.
the ones we're using are it's 15 feet to the top of the pole and about 13 and a half to the actual light. So they're pretty low profile lights.
And what did you say the name of them was again, Don? Just so I can look them up.
So we're getting them from Solar One.
Okay.
I can send you the model, the most recent design, Chris.
That'd be great, JB. Thanks.
Catherine, I am seeing a hand up from Prudence.
Thanks. Is it possible to take a quick look again at the graphic that showed the entrance to from Anna Marsh onto the main part of the island? I'm just wondering, so I know the width is 12 feet, so I just want to confirm that there's plenty of space for pedestrians to be walking and cyclists to be, riding past there and so on. And I'm sure on a normal, when there's not an activity in the amphitheater and so on, I don't think it would be too much of an issue, but.
Was this the slide you were referring to, Prudence?
Yes.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I would anticipate that on a normal day, normal traffic, you wouldn't have conflicts. And in a way, on a busy day, you would have conflicts in a good way. That would basically, in practicality, if this got real busy, most bikers would voluntarily choose to dismount, because it's hard to balance on a bicycle at the pace of pedestrians, and you wouldn't have room to move around them. And I believe that's a good thing when it gets busier. And there's really, it's trade-offs. And I think the trade-off this design made was designing something that works for both user groups on the majority of days, while also providing some opportunities for activities other than movement across. And that the other hand of the trade-off is that, like you were sort of getting at, Prudence, on a real busy day, say if there's an event along the Greenway on the island or in the amphitheater, you may have crowd sizes that, you know, do not allow for room for bicyclists to move past pedestrians. They would just dismount and walk with pedestrians.
Prudence, I would add that the typical multi-use pathways that we see, multi-use meaning pedestrian, bicycles, roller skaters, etc. I think the narrowest they would get would be 8 feet, and that's not really ideal. And I think what you're proposing here is up to 12 feet. Is that right, Chris?
Yes.
And would you have any sort of lane markings to sort of make sure, would you ever recommend that for putting people in their, you know, walk on the right on the right type of idea? Or, I mean, maybe it's too early to tell, but.
It's a good question, and it may be too early to tell. I think it depends on sort of just how much of, you know, my envisioned and sort of personal advocacy for a flexible approach to the spaces, because if it's flexible and you might be changing it, then you want to avoid, at least at first, at least putting down any markings that are, you know, using more permanent paint that would take effort to remove, just in case you do decide that, you know, something's not working, you need to rearrange where the lanes are, where the spaces are, widths of either one. But if you do approach it as a more static design, or if you start out temporary, but once you sort of tweak it and you get it so that it's working as the community would like, then I think that is a useful feature to have if, with two-way traffic, especially on busier days.
Okay. Thank you so much. I think now we should move forward and talk about our next meeting. So JB, would you be sending out a poll for that, or?
Yeah. First off, just one item, follow-up item to close up this part of the agenda. So Chris mentioned it at the beginning that we're looking to get feedback on these sort of big concepts. If you think about like the different areas that the different components of the plan that Chris talked about in his presentation, I think we're looking for you to provide any input as to whether you see elements like that working or not working. We're just looking for additional guidance to make sure that at least the conceptual plan that we have in the making, the sort of skeletal structure of the plan is a good one. And it's sort of meeting the needs of what we've heard from the public so far and from this subcommittee. And I'll send an email out either today or on Monday to reminding people of the deadline to just get back to us by January 8th. So I just wanted to finish with that. I'm also going to, Chris mentioned he's gonna provide me a PDF of this, which I will share with the subcommittee, and I'll also post on our new webpage for this project. And I'm also planning on putting his presentation as a video presentation, so people can have that context as well if they choose to review that.